A history of time. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, and weeks. Time. It marches on relentlessly, outside of human control. But humanity has long found a variety of ways to mark our passage through the eons. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years. But why do we count our collective journey through the ages in these integers? A day makes sense. That's one rotation of the Earth on its axis, and can easily be marked by the rising and setting of the sun. And a year is one orbit of the Earth around the sun, traveling through the 4 seasons again and again. But why 60 seconds in a minute, 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, and 12 months in a year? Let's look back through history to learn the varied origins of these odd measurements of time. Why are there 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour? Modern humans are big fans of the decimal system, dividing everything by 10. It makes sense that early humans would have counted this way, as we have 10 fingers. But this wasn't how the ancient Babylonians thought. They counted with a sexagesimal system, dividing everything by 60. And rather than counting their fingers, they counted their finger joints. 12 joints total on one hand times the 5 fingers on the other hand make it easy to count up to 60. This counting system was used to divide hours into minutes and minutes into seconds by the Babylonians and later the ancient Egyptians. The system became so pervasive in the ancient world that it was adopted throughout Europe, then most of the world, and it is still the timekeeping system we use today. As the world became more and more interconnected, it became more important for everyone in the world to be on the same page, or rather, the same second. So, in 1967, atomic timekeeping was created, which defined a second as 9,192,631,770 oscillations of a cesium-133 atom. This extremely precise measurement means that people on opposite sides of the Earth can coordinate exactly what time it is for trading stocks, scheduling meetings, or ringing in the new year. Why are there 24 hours in a day? The ancient Egyptians devised a system of dividing the day into 24 hours, or 2 sections of 12. 10 hours for the day, plus 1 hour for dawn and 1 for twilight, and 12 hours for the night. But the length of each hour was unfixed, so daylight hours would be longer in the summer and shorter in the winter. They measured the passage of the hours using sundials in the day. As the sun was at its highest and shadows were shortest at noon, this was considered the midpoint of the day, and the opposite time, midnight, was when the day ended and began. At night, the Egyptians used the movement of the constellations through the sky to track the passage of the hours. Charts of these stars can be found on the inside of ancient Egyptian tombs, so the dead would be able to tell time. Ancient Egyptians also used water clocks. A hole in a clay vessel would drip water at a consistent rate and fill up a basin below. When the first basin was full, 1 hour had passed, and the basin would begin to overflow into another basin below it. 12 basins in all would be filled at a consistent rate until the day was half done. Water clocks were used in temples to allow priests to keep track of the hours for prayer. The ancient Chinese, Japanese, and Europeans also used candle clocks, notches on a candle that would mark the hours as the candle burnt down. The Egyptian 24-hour system was adopted by Greek astronomer Hipparchus, and then by the Romans, where it spread throughout their vast empire. The Romans called the 12 hours before midday antemeridium, or AM, and the 12 hours after midday postmeridium, or PM. Utilizing a similar concept to the water clock, the hourglass was also used in medieval Europe. Mechanical clocks in 14th century Europe made it possible to keep accurate, continuous count of the hours of the day. The Catholic Church played a key role in keeping time. Accurate counting of the hours was crucial for making sure prayers were said at regular intervals throughout the day. Often the local church was the only entity well off enough to afford a clock, so they communicated what hour it was to the rest of the community by ringing the church bells at the top of every hour. While each clock was now able to keep regular time, there was no communication between clocks. So one community would say it was 12:30 and the next would say it was 12:45. It wasn't until the 1800s when a universal system of time zones was first proposed. This system divided the Earth longitudinally into 24 parts. Each zone would be 1 hour different based on the time the sun was at midday in that zone. In 1929, Greenwich Mean Time was officially adopted throughout most of the world. Beginning from the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, London, 1 hour is added for each time zone to the east, and 1 hour is subtracted for each time zone to the west. So when it is noon in London, in New York City it is -5 or 7 a.m., and in Hong Kong it is +8 or 8 p.m. That places the international dateline on the opposite side of the Earth from London in the mid-Pacific Ocean. Each new day and new year begins here, where there are fewer landmasses. After all, it would be rather confusing if it was January 1st in London, but still December 31st in Paris for another 23 hours. Why are there 7 days in a week? We have the Babylonians yet again to thank for the 7-day week. They based their months on the 28 days they observed it took the moon to orbit the Earth. Unfortunately, 28 is not divisible by their favorite digit, 6, so they divided it into 4 7-day weeks, 6 work days, and the 7th holy day. The number 7 is also significant as it corresponds with the 7 observable heavenly bodies: the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. The Babylonians ordered the planets from fastest to slowest moving as they appear in the sky. The Babylonians were so dominant and influential in ancient times that their 7-day week spread all around the world. It was adopted by the Persian Empire, the Hebrews, and the Greeks, and it took over the Egyptian system of using a 10-day week. The 7-day week has great significance in Hebrew culture as the book of Genesis proclaims that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Therefore, the 7th day is the Sabbath, or the day of rest and religious observation. Alexander the Great brought the 7-day week to India, where it was then introduced to China. The ancient Romans and Etruscans, on the other hand, observed an 8-day week. Every 8 days, a market would be held, and farmers would enjoy a day of rest to travel to the city and sell their crops and goods, as well as go to the local temple to make offerings and religious observances. Students were also given this day off school. The 8 days were named for the first 8 letters of the alphabet. But every town and city had a different market day, so that itinerant traders could travel from one to another. It might be day C in one town and day F in the next, so there was a lot of confusion. The Romans slowly began to adopt the Babylonian system instead. In 321 AD, Emperor Constantine decreed that the 7-day week would be standard throughout the empire, and he made the 7th day a public holiday. The Romans named the days of the week after the 7 planets observable in the heavens, and each was associated with a god in the Roman pantheon. The sun is personified by the god Sol, the moon by the goddess Luna. Mars is the god of war. The winged god Mercury is the messenger of the gods. Jupiter is the king of the gods and controls the sky and thunder. Venus is the goddess of love, desire, and fertility, and Saturn is a Titan who represents wealth, agriculture, and time. These astronomy-based day-of-the-week names can still be heard in modern Romance languages. For example, in Spanish, the day of the weeks are lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, and sábado. The exception is Sunday, which was later changed to the Christian day of religious observance and was renamed Domingo, Latin for the Lord's Day. The 7-day week spread throughout Europe in the 4th century. When Germanic and Norse people adopted the system, they used some of the Roman planet names, but replaced others with their own deities. And this, via Old English, is where we get the day-of-the-week names we use in modern English. Sunday, Monday, and Saturday are still based on Roman planets. Tuesday is for Tu, a little-known god who sacrificed his arm to the monstrous wolf Fenrir. Wednesday honors Odin, chief among the gods who represents wisdom, healing, and death. Thursday refers to Thor, Odin's son, who wields a hammer and creates thunder. And Friday honors Frigg, queen of the gods and Odin's wife, who is associated with wisdom, love, marriage, and motherhood. Why do we get 2 days off at the weekend? For many centuries, people who were mostly occupied by farming allowed themselves a single day of rest and religious observance each week. They couldn't afford to take more time off, as the fruits of their labor were a matter of their own life or death. But as labor was done mostly during daylight hours and was tied to the seasons, this allowed for a decent amount of downtime throughout the day and year. For example, the Yule or Christmas holiday often meant several weeks of feasts and celebrations for farmers who had worked hard all spring, summer, and autumn, but had little to do in the winter. But all that changed with the Industrial Revolution. More and more people left the lands their ancestors had farmed for generations to seek out jobs in factories. There, the workdays were long, often 12 hours or more. Factories churned out goods all year round, and holidays, including Christmas, were no excuse to halt the endless production. Many workers turned to drink to deal with this harsh new reality. And with only 1 day off a week, they often returned on Monday morning, still drunk or hungover for another grueling shift. In northern Britain, the epicenter of 19th century manufacturing, factory owners saw a significant drop in productivity on Mondays. So they began allowing their employees to leave work at 2 p.m. on Saturday afternoons to allow them to start drinking then and hopefully return to work on Monday sober and refreshed. This practice and its new name, the weekend, was first used in the Journal of Notes and Quarries in 1879. So you can thank hangovers for the extra day off at the end of the week. The first 5-day work week was observed in the United States in 1908 at a cotton mill in New England. This allowed the many Jewish employees to observe the Sabbath, which occurs from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. In 1926, Henry Ford began shutting down his automotive factories for all of Saturday and Sunday. Ford was ahead of his time on many manufacturing practices and believed that happier, better-rested staff would work much more efficiently. In 1929, the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America Union was the first to demand and receive a 5-day work week. Other unions and factories slowly followed suit, but it wasn't until the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act that the U.S. officially had a maximum 40-hour work week and a 2-day weekend. In the next video, we'll explore the origins of the 12 months of the year, where they got their names, the significance of adding a leap year, and check out some alternative calendar systems from around the world. A special thank you goes to my patrons, Robin Morales and Caleb Reese. Don't want to wait to see the rest of this series? Patrons get exclusive early access to almost all of my multi-part series on Patreon early. If you would like to become a patron and help me make more fascinating history videos, check out the link in the description. Thank you for watching.